Okay, I'll start with this one. It's the last I got. Are you saying there should be no boarding schools? Can I say that one of the things I've come out of this is that I don't want to be someone who stands in front of a group and tells anybody how to live their lives. I just think that's not for me. I've just shared with you my story, and there is truth in that. There are things that you can take away, but I'm not going to point them out to you and say you must. But I do think the thing that is in my story that made it particularly hard was that it was done in God's name. That was the thing that really I found trouble. It was such a strong story leading up to that. So, is homeschooling a situation or a solution to missionaries who want to have or do have families? Maybe it could be. That certainly wasn't available in my time. That is, should missionaries have families, and should having children at all be a sacrifice they make? To be honest, that's the answer I prefer. I think if you're called to be a missionary, if you've got kids, maybe that's needs to be reviewed. Is the healing done? No, of course not. It's still ongoing. But look, I have to say I'm very conscious that God has been in this. It was really weird that suddenly there were 80 of us joined together after 50 years of not seeing each other, not knowing where anybody else was. And suddenly this movement starts, and a whole bunch of people were involved, and the LMF was sensitive. And you know the story of the fleece, of finding that family that had been saved. I mean, that just makes the story really complicated, trying to understand it. What does it mean? I don't know, but it does give me that feeling that there is a loving arm around me. How far off track are we in some ways, the 1%, and how do we discern that? Still don't know. I just think that, can I go back to an example that I've used previously in my life, but I was working with someone who was very good at coming in and analysing a situation of, say, a problem, and constructing an understanding of what had happened. And he built this human structure, and then he was inside this structure of understanding, this building, and he polished it from inside, and it was a beautiful thing. It was burnished and bright. But only when you stood outside it could you see that it was on a lead. And I think what my story gave me was the opportunity to stand outside the structure of the faith I lived in until then. And I know many of my peers have decided not to follow Jesus. There's a song that Andrew Peterson has written called "I've Seen Too Much." And I feel like I've seen too much of God at work. I know He's there. And I guess what I've been trying to do is to find ways of knowing that God that are not part of the tradition I've grown up in. I found a lovely home at our local Anglican church, and we have Christian meditation evening every Wednesday night, and found a lovely group of people in whom God is clearly working, and that's been good. How do you tell someone in ministry that going on going on a similar path, not necessarily going to boarding school, but putting church first? It's a really good question. I don't know. Bible. And now for a short word from our sponsor. Besides misplaced ideas about sacrifice, are there also issues about, one, a functional or efficient approach to mission, that is, parents will be more productive if kids aren't around? Can I answer that one first? Hudson Taylor was a man of his time. When he had Chi Fu, I saw a letter he wrote in preparing for this. A year ago, a friend gave me Hudson Taylor's biography in 7 volumes written by Broomhall, which I've been slowly reading through. And I've missed one in the middle, but I've read the rest, since Paul asked me to speak here. And one of the things I'm astonished to see Hudson Taylor saying we should open a prep school so that missionaries could leave their kids at the boarding school while they went home on furlough. And that means that it would be a whole lot cheaper and they could go more often and tell their supporters what was happening. Yes, that was, I think, a cultural point.
And a male thing.
God told me, in inverted commas, is this a substitute for using your brain, taking responsibility, and living with risk and uncertainty? I would really agree with that. Except that my story included times when God did seem to work. And I guess I have a feeling that God is actually way, way bigger than we can ever put into one of our boxes. And I think that he comes into places and he uses whatever we're doing and saying, and he speaks to us. And he loves us. And I just think, I think that's the answer to that. I think it's terribly easy to use religious language, and I try really hard not to say it now. I try to, someone recently suggested we should invent another name for God. That's been tried before. Is there a link between your mother's stillbirth experience and you working in fertility? What a fascinating question. That's a brilliant question. Actually, as I said it, the thought crossed my mind. I don't think so. Who knows what happens at a deep level, but I did have, I set out to do obstetrics because I was planning to be a missionary. Do you wish you could have discussed these issues with your parents? If you could have, how would you have approached it without making them feel excessive guilt or shame? Gee, that question has, in our group of people who went to Chiefly Reconsidered, has been the single most difficult question that we faced. Because obviously there are many of us whose parents are still alive. And that's why, for example, if you look at the book, there are no surnames, because we knew that what people may write could hurt their parents. And as kids, you never want to hurt your parents. And yet your parents did wrong by you. My mother, I think, knew what had happened. Going back through the papers, I found 3 separate occasions where she asked me specifically, John, do you still feel okay about having gone to Chi Fu? And each time I said, no, Chi Fu was great. I wish my kids could have gone to Chi Fu. It was fantastic. And she was comforted. So yes, I would have liked to have discussed it with them, but it's easier without them being there.
Now, I'm going to ask one last question. You alluded just to the art being produced by Wendy, your lovely wife. Can you perhaps unpack a little bit more the relevance of that art and her role in this journey?
Wendy is an artist that paints with oils, and she paints narrative paintings. There's always a story in it, which you can read your own story into. The one that of the people coming down off the mountain, I described to you the originating idea. But when she did it, she just painted it. Not. Do you want to say something, Wendy? No. I'm in dangerous territory here. but she painted it and then became aware from our response that it had summarised the feeling of absolute togetherness. It was an extraordinary conference. There was such openness, such sharing, such support. The other painting that I put up was, that's the one that was the one I was just talking about. The other one is that one of a naked person on an altar. And I've got a clear memory of the day I breached the forbidden barrier and went into her studio, and she painted this naked guy, and I said, "Oh, what are you going to put him on?" And she said, "I haven't decided yet." And I came back a bit later, and you can see what she's on. They'll put him on. And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Oh, it's just the top of the mountain." And I said, "Wendy, that's an altar." Because that's what we were wrestling with, and I've been talking about with. And I love that subconscious expression that art brings.